All right, it is October 6th, 2024. We just got our weekly reset for Warframe, which means we finally get access to the 5 new Incarnons in the Steel Path circuit. We got the Sybaris, the Sybaris, the Dera, the Okina, and the Sestra. I decided to go for the Dera for a couple of reasons, mainly because I figured a lot of people wouldn't be going for this right away. The Sybaris and the Sybaris are kind of just more classic Warframe weapons, and the Sybaris does actually sound like it's going to be a lot of fun. But I like doing things differently. I also used to use the Dera Vandal as just kind of a fun alternative weapon way, way, way back in the day when it was semi-viable. Nowadays, it's really just MR fodder for anything past normal star chart stuff. But that's neither here nor there. So now we have an Incarnon evolution for the Dera, which gives it a slow-firing, high-damage projectile that is hit scan instead of the actual solid projectiles that the Dera normally shoots. It has a huge amount of punch through at 6, and it gains a lot of magnetic damage. So obviously this thing is going to be more effective against taking out Corpus enemies. Not that they're particularly hard to take down in the first place, but it is what it is. I figured that was also partly why people wouldn't be wanting to go for the Dera Incarnon right away, but I don't know, man. I kind of like it so far. The punch through on it is super nice. You usually don't see weapons with a large amount of punch through like this. You don't actually have to use any specific Incarnon evolution to gain additional punch through like some other ones do. It just has an innate 6-meter punch through on the Incarnon form, which is really fun. And obviously with that, lots of magnetic damage piled onto this thing, it's blasting through Corpus enemies, no problem, like you thought it would do. But how about dealing with some armored enemies? We'll throw the Orokin battle group up in here, reset this. The primary fire is still, it's fine, but obviously the Incarnon form is what everyone's going to be after, and that punch through, it's definitely doing something, man. Being able to shoot through lots of enemies like this, especially when you get on Steel Path with higher enemy density, this seems like a pretty solid gun, actually. I didn't think it was going to be anything amazing, and I would not put this on the same tier as, like, a Burst-In or a Torrid, but hey, considering I'm sure a lot of people didn't think this was going to be a good gun in the first place, I think it's doing pretty good. I mean, we're doing 0 armor stripping here. There is a slight amount of damage vulnerability that is applied by Corvex's wall, but it's not that much. I mean, it's going to be pretty much entirely mitigated by the armor that those enemies have. So being able to just blast right through enemies that are armored with this thing, even with magnetic damage, that seems pretty good to me. So this is the build that I quickly threw together on this after I picked it up. Like I said before, I used to use this thing a very long time ago, hence the strange polarizations. I might redo this at some point so that way I could fit in Vigilante supplies, get that little bit of potential extra damage. It definitely doesn't need the ammo, but just the extra potential crit damage would be really nice. Considering this thing fires slow and has low recoil, you could definitely make an argument for using primary Deadhead on here instead of Merciless. And I guess it's going to kind of come down to personal preference. Most people just end up slapping on Merciless. I just do that to play it safe. As far as the evolutions go, and I want to point out one thing before we look at all of these, the challenge you have to complete to get the 4th evolution is the one where you have to kill enemies affected by 4 or more status effects. When I got this, I just grabbed my Epitaph with a primer build and the good old Titron. I was just going to prime a bunch of enemies, slam them with a Titron, get it done really quickly. But it looks like with the last update that we got for update 37, you can't do that anymore. You have to actually get the kill on the enemy with the Incarnon weapon, which isn't a big deal. It's just something I didn't know until I started doing it. It slowed it down a little bit, but still, you only have to kill 30 enemies that are hit with 4 or more status effects. If you got something like an Epitaph or a Kuva Nucor or a Cycron, it's super easy to do. So, not a huge deal. The 2nd evolution is the only one that I'm not entirely sure about yet. You'd probably have to just do some more testing to see exactly which one actually does more damage. Crimson Overture does give more base damage, but the ammo efficiency is pretty useless considering it only applies to the primary fire, and we're really not using that because it's not that good. Versus Paragon Essence, which only gives +4, but it gives more fire rate, which is really nice because, as you saw, the fire rate on the Incarnon form is not fast at all. This is the base fire rate of 2 rounds per second. That's not fast at all. That takes 25 seconds to unload 50 rounds. So, as much fiery as you can get seems like the way to go for this, even with the losing that extra base damage. As far as the third evolution, there's really no winners here at all. None of these are good, sadly. Swift Deliverance and Evolved Autoloader are things that only apply to the primary fire, which again is not that good. The only thing that kind of feels good is Extended Volley, just because it's not a hit scan weapon on its primary fire, so it just makes it easier to get headshots. That's probably the only one that's good, but again, it's really not that good, especially compared to some other guns that have much better third evolutions that are just more useful. And as for the fourth evolution, we have a new one, I believe, that's not on any of our previous Incarnon weapons, called High Ground. Obi-Wan would be very proud, where you get increased critical chance based on a percentage of your status chance. This weapon already has pretty good status chance as it is, and stacking on a couple more status mods boosted up enough to where this actually is giving more crit chance than Death Trap Trigger is. Now, the increased crit damage, again, I'm not sure is going to be the way to go. And the main reason I say that is because when we're looking at this build that I have here that's just using crit delay, we're getting 157% crit chance on the Incarnate form, versus when you slap on Death Trap Trigger, we're looking at 132%. You're much more consistent with getting orange crits, which is giving a much bigger increase to your crit damage than just getting a flat increase to the number. So I'm not 100% sure, but I feel pretty confident that High Ground is going to be the one to go for on here for the increased crit chance, because you're going to get more consistent orange crits on your Incarnate form. This gun is actually pretty simple, all things considered. Not that I thought that it was going to be a strange gun, but just considering what it is and considering people didn't really seem to have any high hopes for this gun, I gotta say I'm kind of impressed with it. But that might just be because of the low expectations that we went into it with. I'll probably end up using this once in a while just on my own because it's a bit of a throwback for me, and it's kind of fun. It's just a little bit different from other things that we have. I like having things that are different. I like having variety. And it's also something that if you find it in your Steel Path circuits grinding out more Incarnon guns, you're not going to be upset with this thing. It does some pretty good damage output. So, I know most people won't be picking this thing up right away, but hey, the next time that the circuit comes around for this rotation, I think you should really pick up the Dera and give it a try.